I still polish them every Sunday. His shoes, by the door, right where he always left them, toes pointing toward the kitchen like he was mid-step, like he just slipped them off after a long shift and was about to ask what's for dinner. They've been there for 6 months. He hasn't. My name is Evelyn Eric. Everyone calls me Eve. And I'm standing in the hallway of a house that used to be a home, staring at a pair of men's dress shoes that cost more than our first car, wondering when I stopped being a wife and became a ghost haunting my own life. This isn't a story about divorce. Not yet, anyway. The papers aren't signed. His name is still on the mortgage. His coffee mug still sits in the cabinet, the one that says "World's Okayest Husband" that I bought him as a joke on our 5th anniversary. This is a story about how a marriage can end long before anyone says goodbye. How you can lose someone who still has a key to your front door. How absence can be louder than any argument you've ever had. And this is a story about the moment I realized I'd been mourning a man who was still alive. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not to our wedding day, not to our first kiss, not to the moment I fell in love. No, I need to take you back further. To the day I learned that the person sleeping next to you can become a stranger without ever leaving the bed. To my 38th birthday. To the morning I woke up alone and realized I couldn't remember the last time I hadn't. Before I go any further, I need to say something. I'm looking at the numbers and it breaks my heart. 80% of you watch these stories of women being betrayed, women being abandoned, women losing themselves, and you leave without hitting subscribe. Is that who we are? People who bear witness to pain but won't stand with those who suffer. If you believe that a woman's worth isn't measured by whether her husband stays or goes, that a marriage ending doesn't mean a life is over, that we deserve to tell our stories and be heard, then prove it. Subscribe right now and comment where you're watching from. Don't let my story be just another video you scroll past. Stand with me, because I'm about to tell you things I've never told anyone, and I need to know I'm not speaking into the void. 3 years ago, Daniel started working late. Not every night, just Tuesdays and Thursdays at first, then Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, then most weeknights. Then Saturdays, too, because there was always a project, always a deadline, always someone who needed him more than I did. "It's just for a little while, Eve," he'd say, kissing my forehead in that distracted way people do when they're already halfway out the door in their minds. "Just until we get through this quarter, just until the merger goes through, just until things settle down." Things never settled down. I was a good wife about it. That's what I told myself. I didn't complain. I didn't guilt-trip him. I made dinner every night, even though I was eating alone 5 times a week. I kept the house spotless. I made sure his dress shirts were always pressed, his favorite coffee beans always stocked, his shoes always by the door so he wouldn't have to hunt for them when he left. Because he was always leaving. And I was always waiting. Do you know what it's like to be married to someone who treats your home like a hotel? Someone who comes in late, showers, sleeps, and leaves before you wake up. Someone whose conversation consists of, "How was your day?" followed by 30 seconds of polite listening before they're scrolling through their phone. I became furniture. Useful, reliable furniture. The kind you don't really notice until it's broken. Here's the thing about emotional abandonment that no one tells you. It's quiet. There are no screaming matches, no thrown plates, no dramatic exits. It's just erosion, like waves on a shoreline. Day after day, year after year, little pieces of you washing away until you look down one day and realize there's almost nothing left. I started talking to myself, actually talking out loud, full conversations with the empty kitchen. "How was work, Eve?" I'd ask while chopping vegetables. "Oh, you know, the usual. Mrs. Patterson's cat got out again. I helped her find him. Took 2 hours. "That's nice, honey," I'd answer myself in Daniel's voice, the voice he used to use when he actually cared. "You're such a good neighbor." I'd laugh at my own jokes, cry at my own stories, console myself when I was sad. I became my own companion, because the man I married had stopped showing up for the job. The shoes, though, the shoes were what broke me. It was a Sunday, 6 months ago, late March, one of those bright spring mornings that makes you believe in new beginnings. I was making pancakes, Daniel's favorite, banana and walnut. I'd woken up early, put on makeup for the first time in weeks, worn the blue dress he once said made my eyes look like the ocean. I was trying. God, I was trying so hard. He came downstairs at 11 a.m., already dressed for work, on a Sunday. "I have to go into the office," he said, not looking at me, going straight for the coffee I'd made. "It's Sunday," I said, not angry, just factual. "We were supposed to go to the farmer's market, you promised." "I know, I'm sorry. Something came up. Critical presentation Monday morning. I'll make it up to you." He wouldn't, we both knew it. But I nodded anyway, because that's what I did. I nodded and smiled and pretended that "I'll make it up to you" meant something other than "I don't value our time together enough to protect it." "When will you be back?" I asked. He was already heading toward the door, toward those shoes he kept perfectly positioned like soldiers awaiting orders. "Late, don't wait up." And then he was gone, the door clicking shut with that soft finality that had become the soundtrack of my life. I stood there in my blue dress, in my makeup, next to pancakes growing cold, and something inside me just cracked. I walked to the door, looked down at the space where his shoes had been, and I saw them, really saw them for the first time in years. They were expensive, Italian leather, the kind of shoes a successful man wears when he wants the world to know he's made it. Daniel had bought them 2 years ago after a big promotion. He'd been so proud of them, had shown me how they were hand-stitched, how the leather would age beautifully with care. I'd been polishing them every Sunday for 2 years, conditioning the leather, keeping them pristine. And in that moment, I realized I'd been taking better care of his shoes than he'd been taking care of our marriage. I sat down on the floor, right there in the hallway, still in my blue dress, and I cried. Not delicate tears. Ugly, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest where I'd been storing years of loneliness and pretending everything was fine. When I was done, I did something I'd never done before. I left the pancakes on the counter. I took off my dress and my makeup. I put on sweatpants and an old t-shirt, and I went out. I didn't go to the farmer's market. I went to a coffee shop I'd never been to on the other side of town, where no one knew me as Daniel's wife. I ordered a latte and a pastry. I sat by the window and watched people live their lives. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like a person instead of a placeholder. When you lose yourself slowly, you don't notice it happening. It's not like a sudden disappearance. It's more like fading, like a photograph left in the sun. I used to be interesting. Did you know that? I had hobbies. I took painting classes. I was training for a half marathon. I had friends I met for wine nights. I read books that had nothing to do with marriage improvement or finding happiness or any of that self-help nonsense desperate people turn to when their lives feel empty. I was Eve, funny, sharp-tongued Eve who made people laugh. Eve who could debate politics and quote poetry and make a soufflé that didn't collapse. Somewhere along the way, I became Daniel's wife. That's it, that's all. And the worst part, I did it to myself. No one held a gun to my head and said, "Give up your painting classes because Daniel works late and you should be home in case he needs you." No one forced me to quit the running group because it would be nice to have dinner ready when he gets home, even if that's 9 p.m. I made those choices. Small, seemingly insignificant choices that added up to a complete erasure of who I used to be. My mother used to say, "Eve, don't make a man your whole world, because the day he leaves, you'll have nothing." I thought she was being dramatic, bitter even. My father had left when I was 12, and I thought her advice came from that wound, not from wisdom. I was wrong. After that Sunday with the pancakes, I started noticing things I'd been blind to. Or maybe I'd seen them all along, but had been too afraid to acknowledge them. Like how Daniel had a whole life I wasn't part of. He'd mention coworkers I'd never met, inside jokes I didn't understand, office parties I wasn't invited to. "It's just a work thing," he'd say when I asked. "You'd be bored, it's all industry talk." But here's what I realized. He wasn't protecting me from boredom. He was protecting his work life from the inconvenience of having a wife there. I was home Eve, not public Eve. I was the woman who made sure his shirts were pressed, not the woman he was proud to introduce. When did I become an embarrassment? Or maybe I always was, and I just hadn't noticed. I started looking at our wedding photos. We got married young, 23 and 25. I was in graduate school studying literature. He was a junior analyst at a financial firm. We were broke and happy and so stupidly in love it hurt. In our wedding photos, he looks at me like I'm the only person in the world, like I hung the moon just for him. I have hundreds of photos on my phone from the last 3 years. Daniel is in maybe 10 of them, and in those 10, he's not looking at me in a single one. When did his eyes stop finding mine in a crowded room? When did I stop being the person he wanted to tell things to? When did we go from partners to strangers sharing a mortgage? I couldn't pinpoint a moment. That's the cruelest part. There was no affair, no betrayal, no dramatic turning point. Just a slow, quiet drift. Like two boats that weren't properly anchored, and the current took us in opposite directions so gradually we didn't notice until there was an ocean between us. 2 weeks after the pancake incident, Daniel came home early on a Thursday. Actually early, like 6 p.m. I was so startled, I nearly dropped the book I was reading. "You're home," I said, stating the obvious. "Yeah," he loosened his tie, looking uncomfortable. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. Those are the words, aren't they? The ones that come before "I want a divorce," or "I met someone else," or "I haven't loved you in years." But that's not what he said. "My boss is having a dinner party Saturday night. Spouses are invited. I need you to come." I need you to come, not I want you to come or would you come with me? I need. Like I was an accessory he'd forgotten to pull out of storage. "Of course," I heard myself say. "What should I wear?" We had a whole conversation about that dinner party. What I should wear, what we should talk about, what topics to avoid. It was the longest conversation we'd had in months, and it was about how to pretend to be a happy couple in front of his colleagues. The irony wasn't lost on me. Saturday came. I spent 3 hours getting ready. I bought a new dress, a deep green thing that cost too much but made me feel beautiful for the first time in forever. I did my hair, my makeup. I wore the perfume Daniel bought me for our 10th anniversary, the one I'd been saving for special occasions. When I came downstairs, he barely looked up from his phone. "Ready?" he asked. Not "you look beautiful," not "wow, is that a new dress?" Just ready. The dinner party was at a restaurant downtown, one of those places where the portions are tiny and the prices astronomical. 8 couples around a long table, making small talk about vacation homes and stock portfolios, and whose kid got into which Ivy League school. I was seated next to Daniel's boss's wife, Patricia. Mid-50s, impeccably dressed, the kind of woman who's had the same hairstyle for 20 years because it works, and why fix what isn't broken? She was kind to me, asked me questions, seemed genuinely interested in my answers. "So, Eve, what do you do?" she asked after the appetizers arrived. It was a simple question, the kind people ask at dinner parties everywhere, but I froze. Because what did I do? I used to teach English literature at a community college, but I'd quit 6 years ago when Daniel got transferred and we moved across the state, and I'd never found another position. "Just temporarily," I'd said then, "just until we settle in." 6 years later, I still hadn't settled in. I'm between things right now," I said, adding how weak I sounded. "I used to teach, but after we moved." "She's been focusing on the home," Daniel interrupted smoothly, his hand finding mine under the table. To anyone watching, it would look like affection, but his grip was tight, controlling. "She's amazing at it. You should see our house. It's like something out of a magazine." Patricia smiled politely and turned to talk to someone else. And I sat there, my hand trapped in my husband's, being praised for my ability to keep a house clean while my actual identity, my actual worth, was dismissed as between things. The dinner dragged on. 2 hours of watching Daniel be charming and funny and engaged with everyone except me. 2 hours of being introduced as my wife, Eve, like that was my full identity, my complete biography. On the drive home, he was in a good mood. "That went well," he said. "Richard really seemed impressed. I think this might mean that promotion." "Great," I said. "You okay? You were kind of quiet tonight." Kind of quiet. I'd barely spoken 10 sentences in 2 hours. "I'm fine," I said. And that was our whole conversation. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't notice that I'd been crying silently in the bathroom between the main course and dessert. He didn't see that I was drowning right next to him. When we got home, he went straight to his laptop. Work emails that couldn't wait until Monday. I went upstairs, took off my expensive dress, and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. Her eyes were empty. Her smile, when she tried to force one, didn't reach those eyes. She looked like someone playing the role of a wife in a commercial for cleaning products. Perfectly styled, utterly hollow. I'd become a ghost. Not dead, but not really alive either. Just going through the motions of a life that had stopped meaning anything years ago. Have you ever had one of those moments where a single question changes everything? Where someone asks you something simple, and suddenly the entire architecture of your life shifts? That happened to me 3 days after the dinner party. I was at the grocery store in the produce section, trying to remember if Daniel liked red peppers or only green ones. He liked red, or he used to. I realized I wasn't sure anymore. Evelyn Eric. I turned around and saw a woman about my age, early 40s, with kind eyes and a warm smile that seemed familiar, but I couldn't place. "I'm sorry, do I?" "Jessica Moore." "Well, Jessica Harrington now. We were in grad school together. We had that seminar on Victorian literature with Professor Chen." And just like that, I remembered. Jessica. We'd been close for a semester, had coffee every week, talked about our thesis projects. Then she graduated and moved away, and we lost touch the way people do. "Jessica, oh my God, it's been, 15 years? "Something like that," she laughed. "You look amazing. How have you been? Are you teaching? I always thought you'd end up at some prestigious university, changing lives with your passion for the Brontes." And there it was, the question that broke me. Are you teaching? Such a simple question, but I couldn't answer it. Because the answer was no, I wasn't teaching. I wasn't doing anything. I was existing in a house that felt more like a prison, married to a man who'd forgotten I existed, with no career, no hobbies, no identity beyond being someone's wife. I must have been silent too long, because Jessica's expression shifted from friendly curiosity to concern. "Eve, you okay?" My throat was tight. "I'm not teaching, I haven't taught in years, I don't really do anything anymore." The words hung in the air between us. I don't really do anything anymore. Jessica reached out and touched my arm. "Hey, do you have time for coffee? Right now?" I had all the time in the world. That was the problem. We went to a cafe across the street from the grocery store. I left my cart abandoned in the produce section, red peppers and all. For the next 2 hours, I told her everything. About Daniel working late, about the emotional distance, about how I'd lost myself piece by piece until there was nothing left. About the shoes by the door and the cold pancakes and the dinner party where I was praised for being good at cleaning. Jessica listened without judgment, without trying to fix it, without telling me I was overreacting or that all marriages go through rough patches. When I was done, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "If Daniel died tomorrow, would you be sad because you lost him? Or would you be sad because you're afraid of being alone?" I opened my mouth to say, of course I'd miss him. But the words wouldn't come. Because the truth, the horrible truth I'd been hiding from myself, was that I wasn't sure I would miss him. The man I married, yes. That Daniel, the one who used to bring me coffee in bed and read poetry aloud just to make me laugh at his terrible accent. That Daniel had been gone for years. The Daniel who existed now, the stranger who slept in my bed but lived an entirely separate life. I wasn't sure losing him would change anything, because I'd already lost him. He just hadn't moved out yet. "I don't know," I whispered. Jessica reached across the table and took my hand. Eve, honey, you know what you need to do, don't you? I did know. I'd known for months, maybe years. I just hadn't had the courage to face it. I waited 2 weeks to talk to Daniel. 2 weeks of rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd say it. 2 weeks of changing my mind a dozen times a day. 2 weeks of hoping he'd notice something was wrong, that he'd ask me what I needed, that he'd fight for us without me having to beg him to. He didn't notice. Finally, on a Sunday night, I couldn't wait anymore. He was on the couch, laptop open, working on some presentation that was due Monday morning. Always Monday morning. Always one more deadline. Daniel, I said, we need to talk. Can it wait? I'm right in the middle of. No, it can't wait. Something in my voice must have gotten through because he looked up, actually looked at me, for the first time in days. What's wrong? I sat down in the chair across from him, maintaining distance. If I got too close, I'd lose my nerve. When was the last time we had a real conversation? He blinked. We talk all the time. No, we don't. We exchange information. How was your day? Fine. What's for dinner? Chicken. That's not conversation, Daniel. That's logistics. He closed his laptop, which felt like progress. Eve, where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? I felt something hot rising in my chest. Anger, maybe, or grief. It's coming from 3 years of eating dinner alone. It's coming from being introduced as my wife, like that's my entire identity. It's coming from making pancakes for a husband who couldn't be bothered to stay home long enough to eat them. I'm building a career, Eve. I'm doing this for us, for our future. What future? The words came out sharper than I intended. What future are we building, Daniel? One where you work 70 hours a week and I what? Keep your house clean, polish your shoes, wait for you to remember I exist. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time we went on a date? When was the last time you looked at me like you still loved me? He was quiet. I could see him thinking, trying to remember and failing. I do love you, he said finally. Do you, or do you love the idea of having a wife? The stability, the clean house, the hot meals, the person who takes care of all the things you don't want to think about so you can focus on work. Eve, you're being dramatic. Don't, I stood up. Don't you dare dismiss me like I'm being hysterical. I've been drowning for years, Daniel, right in front of you, and you didn't even notice. So what do you want from me? His voice was rising now too. I work hard. I provide for us. I'm not out drinking or gambling or cheating. I'm working. I'm sorry that's not enough for you. And there it was, the fundamental misunderstanding at the heart of our marriage. He thought providing money was the same as providing partnership. He thought working hard meant he was being a good husband. He thought that because he wasn't actively hurting me, he was loving me. But absence can be just as damaging as betrayal. Neglect can kill a marriage as surely as infidelity. I don't want your money, Daniel. I want you. The you I married. The you who used to care about my dreams, my thoughts, my life. But that person is gone, and I don't think he's coming back. So what are you saying? My heart was pounding. This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and desperately needing. I'm saying I can't do this anymore. I can't keep being invisible in my own marriage. I can't keep waiting for you to choose me when you've made it clear that I'll always come second to your work. Eve, I think we need some space. I think you should stay somewhere else for a while. The shock on his face was almost comical, like he genuinely couldn't believe I was saying this, like the thought that our marriage might actually be in trouble had never crossed his mind. You're kicking me out. I'm asking for space. Time to figure out if this marriage is something we both want to save, or if we're just going through the motions, because it's easier than admitting we've failed. I can't believe this. He stood up, grabbed his laptop. I've been working my ass off for our future, and this is how you thank me. Our future? Daniel, we don't have a future. We barely have a present. You're never here. And when you are, you're not really with me. You're thinking about work, planning for the next project, the next deadline, the next thing that's more important than the woman you married. He stared at me for a long moment. I thought maybe, finally, he'd say something, that he'd admit I was right, that he'd apologize, that he'd fight for us. Instead, he said, "Fine, I'll pack a bag." And just like that, it was over. He packed a bag that night, took enough clothes for a week, said he'd stay at his brother's place, that we'd talk when we'd both calmed down. But he didn't take his shoes. Those Italian leather dress shoes stayed right by the door, toes pointing toward the kitchen, like he was still planning to come back. The first night alone was the hardest. The house was too quiet. I kept expecting to hear his key in the lock, his footsteps on the stairs. I made dinner for one, and it felt wrong. I watched TV, and there was no one to argue with about what to watch. I went to bed in an empty room, and the silence was deafening. But here's what I didn't expect. I also felt relief. No one to worry about disturbing. No one to cook for who wouldn't appreciate it anyway. No one to make conversation with who wasn't listening. No one to perform for. I could just be. The second night, I ordered takeout and ate it on the couch. Daniel hated eating on the couch, said it was uncivilized. The third night, I painted. Set up an easel in the living room and painted until midnight, getting acrylic on the hardwood floors. Daniel insisted we keep pristine. The fourth night, I called my friend Rachel, the one I'd lost touch with because Daniel didn't like her, thought she was too negative because she'd gotten divorced. "Eve, oh my God, I thought you'd forgotten I existed." "I'm sorry," I said. "You were right about everything. I should have listened." "Honey, what happened?" And I told her about the loneliness, the conversation, Daniel leaving. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Scared, sad, but also lighter." She laughed. "Yeah, that's freedom. It's terrifying and wonderful all at once." A week passed. Then, too, Daniel and I texted occasionally. Logistical things. Bills, mail, whether we should cancel the dinner reservation we'd made months ago for his company anniversary party. We canceled it. He didn't ask how I was. I didn't ask about him. Friends started finding out. The pitying looks, the "I'm so sorry" messages. Everyone assumed I was devastated, that I was the victim in this story. But I wasn't sure I was the victim. Maybe we both were, or maybe neither of us was. Maybe we were just two people who'd outgrown each other and been too afraid to admit it until it was too late. It's been 6 months now. Daniel finally came by last week to pick up more of his things. He looked thinner, tired. He asked if we could talk. We sat in the living room, on opposite ends of the couch, like strangers at a bus stop. "How have you been?" he asked. "Okay, you?" "Yeah, okay." Silence stretched between us. There was so much to say and nothing to say all at once. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about what you said, about me not being present, not choosing you. You were right." I didn't say anything, waited. Work became this thing I could control, you know? I could work hard and see results. Promotions, raises, respect. But with us, with marriage, I didn't know how to fix it when things got hard. So I avoided it. I threw myself into work because it was easier than facing the fact that we were falling apart. "Why didn't you say something?" I asked. "All these years, why didn't you just tell me you were struggling?" "Because I thought I was supposed to have it all figured out. The successful career, the happy marriage, the perfect life. And admitting that I didn't know how to balance it all felt like failure." I understood that. God, I understood that so much. I got lost too. I admitted, I made you and our marriage my whole world. And when that wasn't enough, when you pulled away, I didn't have anything left. No career, no hobbies, no sense of who I was outside of being your wife. That's not your fault. That's mine. So where does that leave us? The question I've been asking myself for 6 months. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I know I still care about you. Part of me probably always will. But I don't know if caring is enough. I don't know if we can fix this. Do you want to try?" Did I? A month ago, I would have said no immediately. The hurt was too fresh, the anger too raw. But I'd been doing a lot of thinking. About marriage, about love, about what it means to choose someone every day even when it's hard. I'd also been going to therapy, Turns out having an identity crisis in your late 30s is pretty common. My therapist asked me a question that stuck with me. If you could have the marriage you want, what would it look like? And I realized I'd never actually thought about that. I'd been so focused on what was wrong, on what was missing, that I'd never articulated what right would look like. I don't know if I want to try, I said to Daniel, but I think I want to try. Does that make sense? He smiled just a little. Yeah, it does. If we do this, things have to change. Both of us have to change. I need to rebuild my own life, find my own identity again. And you need to figure out how to be present, how to make our relationship a priority instead of an afterthought. I know. And I need you to take your shoes. He looked confused. What? Your shoes by the door. They've been there for 6 months. If you're serious about this, about working on us, then you need to decide. Either you move back in fully and we do this together, or you take your shoes and we both move on. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to the hallway, picked up those Italian leather shoes he'd been so proud of. I'm taking them, he said. Not because I don't want to work on us, but because you're right. We both need to figure out who we are separately before we can figure out who we are together. And that means I need to stop leaving pieces of myself here while living somewhere else. I'm either all in or I'm out. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. Can I call you? He asked. Not about bills or logistics, just to talk. I'd like that. He left with his shoes and a box of his things. And for the first time in 6 months, the hallway looked complete without them. I'm not going to lie to you and say I have it all figured out now. I don't. Some days are hard. Some days I miss what we had or what I thought we had. Some days I'm angry all over again. Some days I'm scared of being alone. But most days I'm okay. I went back to school, started taking classes toward getting my teaching certification reinstated. Turns out you can't let a credential lapse for 6 years without some work to get it back, but I'm doing it. I joined a book club, reconnected with old friends, started painting again, seriously this time. I even sold a piece last month. Nothing major, just to a local cafe, but they paid me actual money for something I created, and it felt incredible. I'm learning who Eve is when she's not defined by being someone's wife. And you know what? I like her. She's messier than the woman I'd tried to be for Daniel. Her house isn't always perfect. Sometimes she eats cereal for dinner. She laughs too loud and cries during commercials and has opinions about things that don't matter. But she's real. She's alive. She's present in her own life instead of waiting for permission to exist. Daniel and I talk sometimes. He's in therapy too, working on his relationship with work, learning to set boundaries. We're both doing the work on ourselves that we should have done years ago. I don't know if we'll get back together. Part of me hopes we will, that we'll find our way back to each other as better, healthier versions of ourselves. Part of me thinks maybe we needed to break completely to understand what we lost. Either way, I'm going to be okay. Because here's what I've learned. You can't love someone else well if you don't love yourself first. You can't show up for a partner if you're not showing up for your own life. And a marriage can't survive on autopilot. It requires both people to be present, to choose each other, to do the work. We stopped doing the work. We stopped choosing each other. We stopped being present. And that's on both of us. I pass by that spot in the hallway every day. The spot where Daniel's shoes used to be. Sometimes I still expect to see them there. My brain plays tricks on me, makes me think for just a second that they're back, that he's back, that everything is the way it was. But they're not, and he's not, and it's not. And that's okay. Because I realized something important. Those shoes became a symbol of everything wrong in our marriage. They represented a man who was physically present but emotionally absent. A marriage that looked intact from the outside but was hollow on the inside. A life I was living on autopilot instead of actually living. Removing them was the first step toward reclaiming my space, my life, myself. Last week, I bought myself a new pair of shoes. Nothing fancy, just comfortable sneakers for the half-marathon training I've started again. I leave them by the door, toes pointing toward the kitchen. They're a reminder that I'm going somewhere, that I'm moving forward even when I'm not sure where I'm headed, that my life belongs to me and I get to decide what comes next. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe Daniel and I will find our way back to each other. Maybe we won't. Maybe I'll meet someone new. Maybe I'll discover I prefer being alone. But whatever happens, I know one thing for certain. I will never again lose myself in someone else. I will never again wait by the door for someone who can't be bothered to come home. I will never again polish someone else's shoes while forgetting to take care of my own. I am Evelyn Eric. I'm 41 years old. I'm a teacher, a painter, a friend, a daughter, a work in progress. And yes, I'm still technically married. The papers aren't signed. The house is still in both our names. His coffee mug still sits in the cabinet. But I'm not waiting anymore. I'm living. And that makes all the difference. Emotional neglect in a marriage can be just as damaging as infidelity or abuse. When one or both partners stop being present, stop choosing each other, stop doing the work of maintaining connection, the marriage dies slowly even if the couple is still legally together. If Eve's story touched your heart, if you felt invisible in your own relationship, if you've ever lost yourself in trying to love someone else, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel. Comment where you're watching from and tell me your story. You're not alone in this. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because Eve's story isn't just one woman's experience. It's the story of millions of people who have forgotten who they are while trying to be who someone else needs them to be. Let's build a community where we remind each other, you are enough just as you are, and you deserve to be chosen every single day. Subscribe now. Your future self will thank you.